So the first story I have is Macbeth, and Macbeth is about a woman named Lady Macbeth who is married to Macbeth, and she wants her husband to become king, so she tries to get him to kill Duncan in order to take that position. So throughout the story, readers are given different events and different strategies that are taken in order for her desire to be fulfilled. The literary device that I have for this is foreshadow, because Shakespeare does include the witches in order to give insight on what will happen in the future, but readers don't know how it's going to happen and what events will occur. So through in the beginning of the story, the witches tell Macbeth that he will be king, except we're never given how it's going to happen until later. The next story I have is The Yellow Wallpaper. The Yellow Wallpaper is about a woman who suffers with depression and how she basically feels trapped in her household, and how it's just somewhere where she feels this fear. So throughout the story, we know that she does write in her journal about how she feels, her emotions, about her husband, and we get an insight on how their marriage is and the emotions that she feels with this wallpaper that she continuously tries to analyze. So the literary device that I have for this, I think, is the most obvious, and it's symbolism. Obviously, this yellow wallpaper is meant to represent something, and so throughout the story, the character is constantly analyzing, constantly looking at it, trying to see its significance. And as she starts looking at it, it starts becoming less ugly, and it starts becoming more of a representation of her. The yellow wallpaper is there. It just sits there and it looks at her, and it's meant to symbolize how she feels in her marriage, which is a sense of trapped and a sense of not being able to escape. Also, I also have tone for this story, and I think tone is as essential as the symbolism, because it is what gives readers the evidence that they need in order to show what emotion she was feeling in her house. In the beginning of The Yellow Wallpaper, the speaker is describing the house as a more suspenseful and a slower way, but towards the end, she describes it more quick, and it's just full of less scariness, but more of her trying to get out of there. Next, I'm going to be talking about One Art. One Art is a poem based on the art of losing, and it's the speaker explaining different things that she has lost while trying to convince herself that they didn't mean much to her. So the literary device that I have for this is repetition, because throughout the poem she repeats, the art of losing isn't hard, and it's just a way to show how she was trying to convince herself to not feel certain things when she was clearly affected by what she had lost. And this goes along with the second literary device, which is symbolism. She includes losing a key and a watch, and these are all materialistic things that she loses, but then she compares them to the loss of someone, which is included in the end. And so that is meant to represent how this loss was greatly affecting her, and how it really was much more impactful to her, and how really the art of losing is pretty hard. The next story I have is To Kill a Mockingbird, and To Kill a Mockingbird is a story about a black man who is accused of raping a white woman. Atticus, who is a lawyer, decides to help this man not be put into prison since he is innocent. So throughout the story, as Atticus does take the job and does decide to help him, his life is also severely impacted. The literary device I have for this is symbolism. As it is in the title, the mockingbird is meant to represent innocence and purity. As Tom Robinson is innocent and he did not rape the woman, the mockingbird is meant to demonstrate how he really wasn't full of the crime and how he was innocent, but because of his black race, he was put in trial. The next story I have is Heart of Darkness, and The Heart of Darkness is about a sailor who is ambitious to meet a man named Kurtz because he idolizes him and he finds his ways of living just very important. So Marlowe, which is the main character, we are put in his perspective as he goes through a journey to find this man and to learn about him. The literary device I have is irony, because throughout the story Marlowe constantly expresses that he hates lies and he hates lying. However, once Kurtz dies, his last words are the horror. However, because Marlowe doesn't want to make the wife feel bad, he tells her that his last words were her name. So that does show how he does lie for Kurtz, even after he had constantly expressed that he hated lying. The next story I have is The Count of Monte Cristo. And The Count of Monte Cristo is about a man named Dante, who is basically a very successful man who lives a perfect life. Many people just look at him as very wealthy and very successful. However, he is put into trial after being accused of treason, and readers are shown his journey as he goes to prison and as he gets out of prison. However, once he gets out of prison, he decides to use up his life by putting revenge on the people who did him wrong. The literary device that I have for this story is symbolism, and after Dante got out of prison, the first thing he did was run into the ocean. And I think this was meant to represent basically the idea of baptism, or to purify himself, because he was full of so much hatred and so much revenge in his body. And him going into the ocean was kind of him releasing his soul and giving himself to God once again, because he was so full of grudge, and going into that ocean was a way for him to get it out of him. The next story I have is The Great Gatsby, and The Great Gatsby is about a man named Nick Carraway, who is very determined to learn about the business and to just become successful in that way. After he does meet a very important person who is named Jordan Baker, his life does change, and the readers are put in his perspective on basically living his life with this man, and also being with the woman that he loves, which is Daisy. The literary device that I have for this is foreshadow. There was many different examples of it. The one I chose is Myrtle's car accident, basically because there were many types of examples that showed that was going to happen. One of them was when one of the characters said it takes two to cause an accident. And this just proves how the author included that to show what was going to happen later, which was Myrtle's car accident that caused him to die. So this was one of the things that were included in the book. The next story I have is Fahrenheit 451, which is about a man named Montage, and he's living in a society where it's illegal to read books, and his job is to burn these books to prevent people from reading them. However, after he meets a woman named Clarissa McClellan, his life is changed, and he is given a new perspective on how to look at his society and to look at the people around him and to even look at his job. The literary device that I have for this is point of view. I think that the author chose third person limited because it gives us Montage's emotions and thoughts, but it also gives us a way to look at the society that they were living in and to have the ideas in our head on how severe it was. And so throughout the story, we deal with Montage's battles in his head and in his conscience while also looking at the world around him. One piece of evidence that I have for this is when he was debating with himself, saying you weren't hurting anyone, you're only hurting things. However, this woman was spoiling the ritual, which was him basically telling himself, trying to convince himself, like, it's fine, like, you're only hurting the books, you're not hurting anyone. However, this woman was giving him the perspective that he was doing much more than that it wasn't just about his job and about burning these things, it was about the society and how he was preventing it from expanding. The next story I chose is The Hunger Games, and The Hunger Games is about Katniss Everdeen, who is tributed to fight in the Hunger Games, and this means that she's obligated to fight in it and basically learn how to survive. So the story does take place in an arena, mostly throughout, as readers are shown what it takes for her to kill and to survive. So I chose symbolism for this book because Katniss's dress is mentioned many times, and the one important phrase that they say about her and the dress is the girl who was on fire, and that is meant to represent why she survived and the spirit that she had living in her. It wasn't just about fighting or learning how to battle, but it was about the fire that the girl carried in her and in her mind, and how strong she was mentally. And the last story that I have is The Fault in Our Stars. The Fault in Our Stars is about a 17-year-old girl named Hazel Grace Lancaster who is diagnosed with lung cancer. And after meeting Augustus Waters in a cancer therapy session, they do fall in love, and he gives her a new look on how to perceive her cancer and how to perceive her life. Rather than looking at it so negatively, she should look at it positively and do the things that she has always wanted to do. The literary device that I have for this is symbolism, because water is mentioned throughout the story many times in a positive way and in a negative way. In a negative way, it's what's killing her. The fluids that are covering her lungs are the reason that she has cancer, and it's the reason that she can't breathe. However, after meeting Augustus Waters, which ironically is his name, he is basically the reason that she lives, the reason that she survives, and the reason that her cancer is not such a bad thing anymore. And so, because his last name is Waters, it's meant to represent the positive in it and how it's not always supposed to be so negative. And so he does impact her life greatly, and he does give her a new perception on things, and that's how it positively impacts her and her life.